right, anything from the state before we bring the jury in?
No, Your Honor.
Anything from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, I have a point to raise with you. And that's a little tender point, but we try to make it, I think it's necessary to do so, protect my client. I believe the prosecutors have been leading the witnesses. And it's not an insignificant event. The courts hold that rules of evidence have to be employed for there to be a fair trial. But I'm not objecting at this point to anything you've done. You're a great judge on all that, but forgive me to have a crucial witness in the case. And I don't believe it's fair for the prosecutor to say, did you, are you? That's basically an untestified. And if it is going to happen, I would like to, so we don't break up testimony, just make an objection to all leading questions, unless you feel like I need to stand and object to every question that I think is leading. I'll do it either way.
Well, if you think it's a leading question, raise your objection.
Okay.
But when they say, did you do A, B, or C?
Right.
That's not a leading question.
I agree.
If they say, you did A, B, or C, didn't you? That's a leading question. So when you raise your objections to leading questions, in my opinion, they have not been leading questions. And that's why, unless I sustained your objection, then it was leading. If I overrule your objection, I don't see it as a leading question. Because if you say, is the sky blue, that's not a leading question. But if you say the sky is blue, isn't it? That is a leading question.
If you say, when so-and-so happened, did you do so-and-so without alternatives, choices, that is a leading question.
I don't think so.
Okay, well, we just disagree.
I think a leading question is where you phrase the question so that the defendant only has one possible answer to give, so to speak. Or that it is such that the witness knows the answer you're trying to solicit, and it's framed in such a way that you're basically telling the witness what the answer is. That is a leading question. All right?
Thank you.
All right, anything else from the defense before we call the jury in?
No, sir.
All right, let's bring the jury in. Make sure you have your own notepads and no one else's notepads. State can call you next week.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Christopher Dontell.
Just raise your right hand and place your left hand on the Bible. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give the court in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Watch your step. Get you to state your name and spell your last name for the court.
Christopher Allen Dontell. That's Dontell.
I'm going to have you spell your middle name just because there are a couple different ways to spell Allen.
Allen, Allen.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Obviously, you were in custody at this time, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How long have you been in custody?
Since September 9th of 2021.
When were you arrested in this case?
I was arrested November 11th of 2020.
Were you out on bond for a period of time then?
I was out on bond for, I believe, about 10 months.
what happened to put you back in jail?
The bond got revoked for contact with my co-defendant.
What did you do before you were arrested?
I was a deputy coroner for the Horry County Coroner's Office.
Did you have any other jobs or businesses?
I did. I owned a totally unrelated business in facility maintenance with a business partner in Maryland.
Now, was your case called for trial in December of last year?
Yes, ma'am.
What happened when it was called for trial?
When it was called for trial, I pled to accessory after the fact and conspiracy.
Had you had any conversations with me or any other representative of the state about that plea before you stood up and said that?
No.
Do you have any agreements whatsoever with the state that's causing you to testify today?
No.
Did you plead guilty to those charges because you are in fact guilty of those charges?
Yes.
What are you hoping to get from testifying today if there are no agreements between the state and you?
Personally, I'm hoping to get obviously less time. I'm also hoping to provide closure for the Rice family.
Were you, I'm going to sort of jump around just a little bit because I'm going to go to after the murder, before the murder. Were you interviewed multiple times by law enforcement prior to your arrest?
Yes.
Did you tell the truth during those interviews?
No.
Why?
A few reasons. One, I was still trying to protect my job. I had a family, a house, I had a career, I had a good life, and I'm trying to protect it. I'd also been threatened by my co-defendant that if I ever told the truth, she'd kill me.
You said one of the reasons is that you were trying to protect the house. You had a nice house and a family. Does your family still live in that house?
No.
And some people might think it odd that a man is afraid of a fairly petite woman. Why were you afraid of her?
I was afraid of her because I watched her kill the father of her kid. And threatened to do the same thing to me.
All right. So now, how did you come to meet the defendant?
So, I believe it was early 2018. She came to work for Grindstaff Transport, which is the company that contracts with the coroner's office as well as several funeral homes in the area to do body transport. I had worked for them for several years at that time, and when the defendant came to work for Grindstaff, I was one of the ones that was kind of put in charge of helping to train her. So I taught her things like, different funeral homes have different preferences for how you speak to the families and the questions you ask, and things that you do to the body when you get back to the funeral home to prepare it for embalming. So I trained her as to the preferences of all those different funeral homes, as well as the preferences of the coroners so that we could serve our customers the best we could.
You've sort of explained it, but what does a body transport company do?
Okay, so the body transport company, in the case of a funeral home, say a funeral home calls, we would go to the place of death meet with the family, ask several questions that are repetitive. Yes, the same questions with each body. And then bring the body from the place of death to the funeral home and prepare it for embalming or cremation, depending on the circumstances. And in the case of a coroner call, we would respond to the place of death, and that could be anywhere from a hospital bed to the side of the road, anywhere in between. And we would work with the coroners while on scene, just to make their job as easy as possible. We would draw blood if they needed us to draw blood. We would help collect bodily fluids. We would help package evidence, really whatever they needed.
Would body transport workers work alone or in pairs?
Both, depending on the circumstances. On a coroner case, typically it would be alone, because usually on a coroner case there's firemen or police on scene that would help us with the bodies. In the case of a funeral home, most of the time 2 people would go, because the family's there and you want to make sure you're handling the body with care and respect.
Did you ever see the defendant lifting a body?
Thousands of times, yes.
Did she always require assistance?
No.
You said that you met her, I believe you said sometime in 2018. When you first began working with her, did you introduce her to your family?
I wouldn't say it was when I first went to work with her, but I believe the first time she met my family was when we were living in a condo off of 38th Avenue in Myrtle Beach, and my wife was pregnant at the time, and we were moving into our new house in Conway, so I was having to box things up and lift the weight on my own because my wife couldn't lift because she was pregnant. And I just happened to be talking about it on one of our death calls one day that, I had a lot of work to get done. I was having to box things up. I didn't have much help. And the defendant volunteered to help me lift the boxes and move them downstairs and things like that. So I took her up on that offer, and she came to the condo and helped, and she met my wife.
Do you know where the defendant was living at that point?
She was living in Merle's Inlet.
Who was she living with?
The victim in the case and her 4 children.
The victim being Greg Rice?
Greg Rice, yeah, sorry.
When you moved from the condo, where did you and your family move?
We moved to River's Edge Plantation off of Highway 90 in Conway.
At some point, did you and the defendant begin a sexual relationship?
Yes.
How did that begin?
Well, it began, I would say, when there was a time I invited her to lunch at a restaurant called Bricks in Myrtle Beach. She came to lunch with me, and she ordered several drinks. It was the first time I had seen her drink. She ordered a bunch of amaretto sours and got hammered drunk. After that, and let me backtrack, I was a regular at Bricks. I went there a lot. I went there with my family. I went there after leaving the hospital from autopsies for lunch. I was a regular there. So after the initial time that the defendant met me there, I continued to go there on my own, and I started seeing her there. I would run into her there. She would already be there, and she would typically be drinking by herself. And she started becoming a regular there herself, more so than I was.
This was before your sexual relationship began?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting
No,
there.
no, you're fine. I'm just trying to make sure we keep the timeline correct.
I got you. So then on one of these occasions at Bricks, it was at night, she paid her bill, and she told me that she had to talk to me outside privately. So I went outside with her, and she told me to get in the van, her work van. So I got in the passenger seat, thinking she was going to ask me a question about work or something like that. And she turned the van on and threw it in reverse. I said, "Where are we going?" She said, "We can't talk right here." It was right by the entrance and there were people around. So in the back parking lot of Bricks, it's kind of an incline in the parking lot, and it goes up to a service road, like a dead-end service road. And she pulled into the service road and parked. And I said, "This looks suspicious. Why are we here?" She said, "Have you ever cheated on your wife?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, you're about to." And she climbed over the console on top of me and started to kiss me. And on that occasion, I gently pushed her off of me and said, "I'm not doing this." For the next several days, she kind of made fun of me about it and told me that I was the only guy she's ever met that would have turned down that opportunity. And eventually I didn't push her off of me. I gave in, and that's when it all started. And it became a regular event.
Do you know about when the affair started?
It would have been very late 2019, very early 2020.
Would you say that the two of you were fairly sexually active with each other? Did you have sex a lot?
I don't know. Depends on what your definition of a lot is, but yeah, fairly regularly, yeah.
During your time together with the defendant, before the affair started and all the way until you stopped having contact with her, did you ever meet Greg Rice?
No.
Did the defendant ever talk to you about her relationship with Greg Rice?
Yes.
How did she describe her relationship with Greg Rice?
She described it as abusive. Basically that he was a drug abusing woman beater, and that was why she left him.
During your time with her, did you ever see any physical evidence of any abuse that she suffered?
No.
Did you, other than what the defendant said to you, did you have any other reason to believe that Greg Rice had anything to do with illegal drugs?
No.
At some point, did the defendant move into your neighborhood?
Yes.
Go back to my point. That's a leading question, in my opinion, objective.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Do you know when that was?
She moved into the neighborhood around Christmas time of 2019. I remember that because she had a Christmas tree in her house before she had anything else.
Okay. Once she moved into the neighborhood, did you and your family begin to spend time with her and her children?
Yes.
Okay, let me actually back up. Who moved into her house? Excuse me.
In River's Edge?
Yes.
She had left Greg, and she moved into the new house with her 4 children.
Approximately how far away was the house that she moved into from your house?
Right down the street, within a 2-minute walk, roughly.
And I think I might have just asked this, but did your family started spending time with each other?
All the time.
Did you ever have an opportunity to speak to the children about their father, Greg Rice?
Yeah, I mean,
Object to what Red Mike might have said. It's hearsay.
Yeah, you can't get into what he said, and I'll allow that question.
Okay.
I mean, you can't say what Greg Rice said.
I didn't ask what Greg Rice said, I was asking about the children, but I can ask it this way. In your time with the victim's children, did you see anything that would indicate that the children were afraid of him?
Just the opposite.
Okay.
No, they spoke very high. They spoke of him the way I would want my children to speak of me.
I get you on, he's talking about what other people said, that's hearsay. Hearsay, what the children said, hearsay.
At some point, did Erica, your wife, find out that you and the defendant were having an affair?
Yes.
And let me ask the obvious question first. Before she found out, did you take steps to hide the affair from her?
Yes.
Did that include lying to her?
Yes.
So at some point, Erica found out about the affair. Do you know how she found out?
I believe it was when she received anonymous text messages.
Were you together with her when she got those text messages?
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
Did she?
You know, that's not a affirmative answer. He said it was pretty certain, objective. Question and answer.
I can
What
clarify.
do you want me to do, strike it?
Just have him regraded or check on him, see if he is testifying to what he knows. Can't testify, not sure.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Okay. I forgot where I was now. Did she show you any of those? Did she confront you about those text messages?
Yes, she did.
What was your response to her about the text? Do you remember what any of them said?
It was something to the effect of, your husband has impregnated someone. Just thought you might want to know about it.
What did you say when she confronted you with those text messages?
That I had no idea who would have sent that, and that it wasn't true.
So you lied to her because you were trying to cover up your affair?
Yeah.
At that time, did you have any idea who sent those messages?
No.
Did you and or your wife ever, well, I'll stick with you just so it's personal knowledge. Did you ever speak with the defendant about those texts?
Yes.
Did the defendant ever tell you who was sending the text or who she thought was sending the text?
She pretty much immediately said that it was Greg Rice.
And I apologize if I've asked you this before. Did you ever meet Greg?
No, as far as, I never shook his hand. We never spoke. I saw him. He would drive through the neighborhood to pick up the kids. I would wave at him, just a friendly wave. That was the extent of my interaction with him.
After those initial texts, did you and your wife remain married?
I'm sorry?
After Erica received those initial texts, that's a hard word, did you guys remain married?
Yes.
Did it cause additional strain on your marriage?
Yes.
Court's indulgence for a moment. I'm not saying you did commit at this time. I'm just going to show. Your Honor, I'm going to approach, with the court's permission, with State's Exhibit 153. you and the defendant have more than one conversation about who might be kind of trying to leak word of the affair?
Yeah, it was an ongoing conversation over the course of several days. You know,
And were they in-person conversations, text conversations, or both?
both.
If you could just look at Exhibit 153, it's not admitted yet, so don't read it out loud or anything.
Okay.
But is that a text conversation that you had with the defendant?
It appears to be, yes. I mean, it's been 5 years, so I don't remember exactly, you know.
Right.
But
Is that your phone number that's in
it is my phone number, yes.
And is that her phone number?
Yes.
Did anyone else ever text from your phone?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And to your knowledge, did anyone ever text from the defendant's phone? Text you from the defendant's phone?
Other than her, no.
Next.
Your Honor, I don't think you can know who texted her phone, so I moved to strike that in.
He said not to my knowledge.
Overruled, I will allow.
Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here. Before your wife got those anonymous text messages, had you and the defendant and one of her daughters and a friend gone to Florida together?
Yes.
Okay, just tell us a little bit about that.
So the conversation began with I was going to go to Florida to two things. The Jacksonville area to look at some convenience stores. There was a contract that I got with my maintenance company every year to pressure wash lots of convenience stores up and down the East Coast. And the client that we worked for had numerous stores in Florida that I had never had the chance to bid. And I had been wanting to go there for a long time to drop a business card to some of the franchisees at the stores and try to get my foot in the door to get the Florida region of the contracts. There's also a really good pizza place in St. Augustine that I like to go to. And I discussed all this with the defendant.
So how is it that you and the defendant and these two other people went together?
Yeah, she said, well, I'll pay for the whole trip. And she booked the trip and we went together and I didn't resist.
Did you tell Erica that you were going with the defendant and the defendant's daughter and her friend?
No, she knew I was going to Florida, but not with them.
So I'm approaching with State's Exhibit 98. And I'm just going to direct your attention to, I think it's the 6th line. Is that an accurate list of the people who went to Florida on that trip?
Yes.
To your knowledge, did anyone else know who all went on that trip?
No, not to my knowledge.
While you were, and how close in time was that trip to when Greg was killed?
I don't remember the exact dates of the trip. I know Greg was killed on the night of the 2nd. It would have been within a week to 2 weeks, I believe.
During that trip, did the defendant tell you anything about any text conversations or issues she was having with the victim?
Yes. So during that trip, she claimed that Greg Rice was upset because she had let the kids with him for longer than he expected to have them. And then she showed me what appeared to be a text from Greg saying something to the effect of, "You have a storm coming."
Did she show you just that text message, or did she show you like an entire conversation?
She did not show me the entire conversation. Matter of fact, that's the only line I remember.
Did the defendant talk to you about that sort of message?
Well, going forward from that point, she acted as if she was terrified of Greg, and that storm coming message meant that he was going to abuse her again. She was in fear of him, and it was a constant subject of conversation after that. I don't know how she did it. She's very tech savvy, and she did something with her phone to where she could see Greg's phone screen on her phone, and she could track his location. She could see if he was texting somebody, she could see his screen on her screen from wherever she was. Like I said, it was a constant conversation. She thought that he was going to use the kids against her. She claimed that he had made comments about trying to take the kids and get child support from her. Like I said, it was a constant conversation after she got that text.
Again, I apologize, I'm jumping around a little bit. At some point, did the defendant tell you that she had become pregnant?
Yes.
Was that before or after the trip to Florida?
Before. That would have been in, I believe it was late August.
Did she tell you who the father of the child was?
She said that the father of the child was me.
At some point during this time period when the anonymous text messages were being sent, was there ever any conversation about a package coming in the mail?
Yes. One of the anonymous texts that my wife received said that something along the lines of all the proof is in the mail, or all the proof, all these messages will be sent in paper form, something like that, in the mail.
And so what conversations did you and the defendant have about this potential package?
I don't remember exact conversations we had about it, but I can tell you when it came, I was home and I received it.
Who was the package addressed to?
It was addressed to my wife.
Was there a return address on it?
There was. It was from an education company in Columbia.
What made you think that that was the package that would be related to the anonymous texts?
Because the company that was listed, or the school that was listed as the sender, was not the school that my wife worked for. It was a different one. And combine that with the fact that supposedly this stuff was coming in the mail, I put two and two together, and I opened the package, and
What did you see inside?
I saw several pages of what appeared to be screenshots of text messages, as well as photo collages. And to be honest with you, I didn't even examine it. I knew what it was, and I got in my car and drove it down to the defendant's house and gave it to her.
Did you have any idea what she was going to do with that package?
I did not.
But you said you saw photo. What did you see inside the box?
Photo collages. Some of the pages had screenshots of text messages. Some of them had photo collages. I mean, I noticed that there were some pictures I recognized of myself on there, but I didn't analyze each page or look at all the pictures.
Okay. Now let's move to October 2nd.
Okay.
Starting at about 6:15, the jury has seen evidence that you and the defendant left River's Edge in separate cars around 6:15, 6:20.
That's testimony from the solicitor.
I'm just trying to orient him into, so
I sustain the objection, just ask your question.
at some point that evening, did you and the defendant leave River's Edge community at about the same time?
I don't believe so. I believe I was already out working,
Course of indulgence.
and when I met with her, if I recall correctly, it was at the Heritage Wildlife Preserve.
Course of indulgence. What type of car did you typically drive?
A silver Ford Explorer.
Was that a county car?
Yes.
What type of car did the defendant typically drive?
Typically I believe it was silver, Honda Odyssey minivan.
I'm approaching you with admitted exhibits 136 and 138. So let's start with 136. Do you recognize both the car and the driver in that photo?
Yes, that's the defendant driving her work van.
Okay. And what's the date and time stamp on that?
October 2nd, 6:16 p.m.
Okay, now look at 138. Do you recognize that car?
Yeah, that appears to be me entering the gate at October 2nd at 6:20 p.m. Okay.
And you said entering. Is that you entering the community or?
Yeah, I believe we're both entering in that picture. I'm not sure though. No.
And if you don't know, that's fine.
I don't know.
Okay. Shortly after this time, did you two go to, and I'm just calling it Preserve because the name's too long, the Preserve on International Drive?
We did, yes.
What was the purpose of going there?
Shooting,
Had you done that before?
yes, many times.
Did you, when you would go shooting, who was shooting? Was it you, was it her, or was it a combination?
If I might backtrack a little bit.
Absolutely.
Prior to all of this, I would say total throughout the duration of time that, from the time I met the defendant until all of this transpired, we probably went shooting 12 to 15 times. Sometimes it was at the Heritage Preserve, sometimes it was in the woods off of Water Tower Road. I know she shot more frequently than I did, but she often asked me to go with her, and sometimes I did. Sometimes I went and didn't shoot, and she shot. Sometimes I did shoot.
So, speaking directly to the night of October 2nd, who shot that night?
The defendant.
Do you know what kind of gun she used?
I don't know the kind of gun. I know it was a small black gun. I don't know the brand or anything.
How long, you can estimate, and if you can't, that's fine. How long were you in the Preserve that night?
Not long. So I had worked all day that day. I went on call for the coroner's office at 8 o'clock that morning. I got my first call pretty much right away, and I stayed busy all day. I hadn't eaten much, and I wanted to go to get some dinner. That was my priority. So when we shot, we weren't there more than 10 to 15 minutes. I remember it being muddy, and all I could think about was eating. So we didn't stay long.
So did you guys in fact go to eat after that?
We did, yes.
Where did you go?
Abuelos.
How long were you at Abuelos for? You can estimate or not if you don't know.
I would only be estimating an hour maybe.
What did you do after Abuelos?
So, well, while we were at Abuelos, I remember that a friend of my family who works at a different restaurant. It was her last weekend working there, and I mentioned to the defendant that we should have gone there in Socastee. So we decided that when we left Abuelo's, we would stop by there to see her on her last shift. So we left Abuelo's and headed for the restaurant in Socastee. When we got there, there was a line out the door and there was nowhere to park, so we ended up not even going there. So we continued on down the road to another friend of ours' residence. He lives on a houseboat in the Osprey Marina. So we headed toward the Osprey Marina.
Did you end up going to that friend's house?
We did not. So backtracking again, I'm sorry. The defendant was acting unusual all day that day. Starting early in the day, she was unavailable for my death calls, which was very unusual because normally when I'm on call, she's right behind me. She followed me around the county, and she would respond to my calls whether I needed her there or not. So it was unusual that she wasn't available part of the day. And then she was very quiet. Even at Abuelo's, she was reserved and something was off. So then while we're driving, when we got to the Osprey Marina, I was turning in and she said, "Just keep driving. I don't want to see Charles, who's our friend. I don't feel like dealing with people. Just keep driving."
So what did you guys do?
So we continued driving. I remember we drove down Enterprise Road to Bay Road and looped back around to 707.
Was anything going on between the two of you during that ride?
Not that I recall in particular, but
Okay.
we, at some point I remember I realized that I didn't have any of my supplies that I needed for work. I had a little blue bag that I carried with me that had all the paperwork I needed. It had my gloves, it had things I would need if I were to get a death call, and I had left it in my Explorer at Abuelo's.
So what did you do when
So
you
we
lost
went,
it?
at some point we went back to get the bag out of my Explorer in case I got a death call, so I would be able to do what I needed to do.
Can I infer then that you and the defendant were driving in her van when you...
We were, yeah, we left my Explorer at Abuelo's, and I was driving her van.
What happened after you went back to Abuelo's to pick up your bag?
She said that she needed to stop by at Myrtle Beach Funeral Home because she had left her glasses there earlier that day.
Was this after typical business hours at a funeral home?
It was late. It was dark, so it had to have been 9 o'clock or so.
How would you guys have gotten into the Myrtle Beach funeral home? If it's after hours.
With the key.
Who had a key?
The defendant definitely had one. I may have also had one. I had keys to some funeral homes, but not others. So we had at least one key with us, maybe two.
Okay. So the defendant says she has to get glasses. Did you, in fact, go to the funeral home?
We did.
Tell me about that. What happened?
So we went to the funeral home, and I assumed she was looking for her glasses. She went to the left. We walked in the back door of the building. She walked to the left, which is back toward where the embalming room is. I went straight up the hall toward the office. At some point, I heard her speaking, presumably on the phone. And then I heard the conversation end. She came to the office. When she got to the office, she had her cell phone out, and I was talking to her, and she wasn't looking up at me. Whatever was on her phone, she was very, had her attention. And she said, "I have to go see Greg."
Did she say why she had to go see Greg?
She did not, but I said, "Well, I'm not going."
Why not? Why wouldn't you go?
Because she was constantly complaining about drama and abuse, and I didn't want to be part of it. She would typically take a friend with her. Her friend Savannah would go with her to Greg's house, or she would go on her own.
Is that based on what she told you, or did you actually witness her?
Based on what she told me.
Okay. So what?
I didn't want to be caught up in drama.
What happened when you told her you weren't going to go?
She said she would just be a few minutes, just go with her.
What happened next?
So I drove her van. We drove toward Greg's apartment complex, which is off of Arrowhead Road.
Let me stop you there for a second. Did you know where Greg lived before this?
I knew where his apartment complex was. I had been there on death calls before, so I knew roughly, I forget what it was called now, but I knew how to get to the general area.
Did you ever require directions to get there?
No.
What? So I'm sorry, now continue. You headed in the direction of the victim.
We headed in the direction. She called Greg while we were driving, and I guess he had indicated to her that he was outside. She told me that she makes him meet her outside because she's uncomfortable going to his apartment. So he meets her outside of the apartment complex. So we were driving down Arrowhead Road, and I saw Greg on the left side of the road walking towards us, just outside of the apartment complex. And I said, "Is that him?" She said, "Yeah." So as we approached him, I started to slow down, and she said, "Make a U-turn." So I kind of passed him, made a U-turn, and as I pulled up alongside him, she said, because I was going to, he stopped walking, and he kind of turned to face our van, and I was stopping right next to him, and she said, "Pull up, don't be awkward." So I said, "Pull up." She said, "Yeah, pull up." So I pulled up so that we had passed him.
What happened next?
She opened the door and shot him.
How many shots did you hear?
A lot.
What did you do?
I froze.
Did the defendant say anything to you at that point?
Yeah. She said, "What are you doing? Help me, help me." Cursing at me, "Help me."
So what did you do?
I got out of the van and walked toward the back of the van. Greg was laying right at the back of the van on the side of the road.
What did you do?
She said, "Put him in the back of the van." So I opened the back of the van, and we started treating him just as we would treat any other body. And I grabbed the sheet, wrapped it up like a rope, put it underneath his torso to help with leverage. And then in her van, she had what we call I don't remember what we called it, like a sliding board. It was a black plastic backboard, and it was flexible so that you could put a body on it and easily slide it and maneuver it around. I pulled that off of her stretcher, and using the sheet as leverage, we both picked Greg up and put him on the sliding board and put him into the back of the van.
What did you do next?
I reached in and started buckling him. So on the mortuary stretchers that we had put him on, there's 2 seat belts, and you click them, and what they do is they hold the body in place. And I started to do that, and she started screaming and cussing at me and said, "What are you doing? We need to get out of here. We need to get out of here." And I shut the back door. Greg was just kind of haphazardly on the stretcher. He wasn't buckled on. He wasn't covered up. And we got in the van, and I hightailed it out of there.
How long would you say you were in the Arrowhead community?
Not long. I mean, it happened fast. And by the time when I pulled up in front of him, it was like one swift move. Like she opened the door, slid out, and it was pop, 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 pop.
Had the two of you moved bodies before together? You just have to say yes or no.
Yes.
Was, I mean, as part of your jobs, was that a fairly frequent occurrence?
Yes, every day.
So you said that you hightailed it out of the Arrowhead community. Where did you go?
We went back to the funeral home.
What happened when you got there?
Well, first of all, on the way there, I asked her, what just happened? Why did you do that? And she didn't say much. She told me to go to the funeral home. And I just remember the complete nonchalance. Just like this, it was like a minor inconvenience that we were going through.
So what happened once you got back to the funeral home?
So at the funeral home, when you bring a body in, they have a garage and they have coolers in the garage, and the coolers have one door that you open, and there's either 3 or 4 shelves inside the door. And wheeled Greg in on stretcher. I made a cremation container, which is pretty much a glorified cardboard box. And you use little zip ties to tie it up and make it rigid. And I made one just like we would make for anybody else. And I put it into the cooler and pushed the stretcher up next to it and started to push Greg in. And the whole time she was yelling, "Are you stupid? Are you stupid? Hurry up. We got to get out of here. Hurry up. Are you stupid?" Over and over again, "Are you stupid?"
Did you have any concerns about leaving the victim in a cooler and leaving the funeral home? So sometimes the coroner's office will use funeral homes as extra storage, like if we're out of room at the morgue in Conway, or if it's, for whatever reason, we might need to leave a body at a funeral home. And typically we put a note on the shelf that the body's on. It just says "hold for coroner," and that's what I did. I put a note on it that said "hold for coroner." Would that have been unusual? A note, hold for coroner?
No, that was a regular thing.
During this time that you're taking Greg out of the van and loading him into the cooler, were you able to see him? Was there a lot of blood?
So the night that we put him in,
Yes, the night he was killed.
I did not look. I had draped a sheet across him when we brought him in from the van, and I just pushed him in like he was. Now the next night, I saw him.
Okay,
And there
I'll
was-
get to that in just a minute.
Okay.
So after you put Greg in the cooler, what did you guys do?
Got out of there fast and went back to her house.
Did you go back to...
I'm sorry.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
On the way back to her house, we had to get my Explorer from Abuelo's. So we stopped to get my Explorer before we went back to her house. On the way to get the Explorer, she told me that if I ever told anybody what happened, she would kill me. and that we have to be in this together. She told me that I have to stay with her that night. I better not leave her. And then we went, got my Explorer. We went to Lowe's food store, International Drive, and I can't remember which vehicle we left there, but we left one of the vehicles in the parking lot of the Lowe's food store. And
So
took
your
the other
Explorer
two.
was still at a Lowe's, but you went and picked it up and went to Lowe's? I'm just trying to get that.
Correct, yes.
Where did you go after that?
We went to Megan's house.
Okay. So at some point, did you go back to the funeral home that night?
We did.
Why?
So I got to backtrack and tell you background. When we got back to her house, her daughter, Savannah, was watching TV in the living room. And I just remember thinking how normal it looked in the house, and I had to pretend that this hadn't just happened. I'm sorry. Megan went straight to the shower, and I sat on the couch with Savannah. I'm sorry, Savannah.
Okay, you just have to answer my question.
I'm sorry. Sat on the couch with her. And I tried to make small talk. Like I hadn't just watched her mother kill her father. I'm sorry, what was the question?
You said you would return to the funeral home at some point that night. So you got back to Megan's house, she's upstairs taking a shower, you're on the couch with Savannah, what happened next?
Okay, so there's an app that we use for the coroner's office called Iris.
Is that
And
IRIS?
I believe it's IRISS.
Okay, thank you. So there's an app,
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So the Iris app, it tells you what's going on in the county. Only law enforcement, fire, rescue, coroners have access to it. And I remember seeing on that app that there was what appeared to be a pending death on the south end of town. It said it was a cardiac arrest. The call came into the cardiac arrest. I believe it was a man that was found down in his driveway. And I told the defendant after she got out of the shower about that call. I said, it looks like there's going to be a death call. Looked at the map on my phone at the river at the county line, and I decided to head out 378. So I drove out 378, and there wasn't much traffic, but as I got close to the county line, there was a car that had flown up behind me, and I pulled into a little convenience store about a mile or so before the county line, and I let that car pass. And then I continued out toward the river. When I got there, I actually drove across the bridge, and after you cross the bridge into Marion County, there's a sharp bend, I believe, to the right in the road. After that bend, you can see ahead for a long ways. And I made sure that there was no oncoming cars, so that nobody was going to pull up on me while I was doing what I was doing. And once I knew there were no cars coming, I did a U-turn. I went back to the middle of the bridge. And I popped the back gate of the Explorer. Took about 10 seconds to put them in the water.
What did you do after that?
Went back to the defendant's house.
Was there any conversation at that point about getting rid of, had you done that?
I came in and she smiled at me and said, "Did you do what you need to do? What you needed to do?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Good boy."
Let me just back up on something. Do you know what happened to the gun the defendant used? Did she ever tell you what she did?
She
with it?
told me that she put it in the intercoastal waterway off of International Drive, along with shell casings and I believe some of his other personal effects.
Okay. At some point, did the two of you kind of strategize about what to tell the police if they ever questioned you?
Yeah. So I got a call from Greg Lent with Horry County Police asking me to come in to talk about Greg Rice's disappearance. At this point, he hadn't been found. So I told the defendant that I got that call, at which point she started drumming up this whole story about what we were going to tell him. And that's what we went with, and it was not true at all.
Is that the story you repeated to the police
Yes.
time and time again before your arrest?
Yes, I felt like I had no choice.
At some point, did you decide to tell the truth about what happened?
I did.
And what spurred that decision? What made you decide to tell the truth?
Well, the first conversation I had with my lawyer, I told her what I was guilty of, and I said, I will plead to that now and I'll tell the whole truth. But I want my family to be protected, because as soon as it came out that I was talking and actually telling the truth and not the story, I didn't know what she would do. She would hurt my family. So back in December, my lawyer arranged for, I guess they came to an agreement with the county that they would put some type of GPS radius around my family. And my understanding of it was that if the defendant, who was on home detention at the time on an ankle monitor, were to enter into these areas anywhere near my family, the police would be dispatched immediately. That was the point where I was somewhat comfortable telling the truth.
So did you meet with Ms. Waller and investigators at J. Reuben Law?
Yes.
At the beginning of that meeting, did you tell the entire truth?
At the beginning of the meeting?
Did you come in with a written statement? And I'll actually...
I did. Well, yeah, I came in with a written statement. When I wrote the statement, I didn't tell the whole truth. That was prior to my conversation with my lawyer about the GPS radius. protecting my family. So yes, I came with that statement, but during that meeting, the safety arrangement was made, at which point I told the entire truth.
Court's indulgence for a moment. Your Honor, may I approach? And this is previously admitted, State's Exhibit 158. All right, so this is an aerial view of the Arrowhead complex with the Flint Lake Apartments right in here.
Okay,
I'll
yeah.
hold it closer to you because I know you can't lift your arms. Can you show us where?
So this is Arrowhead right here?
Yeah, that's Arrowhead.
Okay.
And this would be, I think that's the,
Clay Pond?
yeah, that's the Clay Pond entrance.
Okay.
So can you tell us, if that's Flint Lake, where along this road
Yeah.
the defendant,
So he
the
would-
victim was shot?
He would come out and make it right.
Here, I'm just, sorry, I'm gonna hold it up like,
Yeah.
Tommy, can you just not block the view of the jury? Sure. Thanks.
It would have been somewhere in the vicinity of where this new, it looks like a new construction road is on one side, and then looks like there's a fairway for a golf course on the other side of the road, straight across from the construction.
Okay, so just, I wanna make sure and then I'll show the jury. This area right here where this construction is,
Correct. Generally right in that vicinity.
did you see that, Tommy?
Yeah.
Okay. Right by the construction. Court's indulgence for a moment, please. I don't have any further questions at this time. I believe Mr. Tommy Burton may have some questions for you.
We've been at it a while. Let's go ahead and take a short break before we start the cross-examination. We'll take about a 10 to 15-minute break, and the notepads in the jury box. We'll bring you back out.
Your Honor, do I have a question? Do I have a question? Okay.
All right, anything from the state before we recess?
No, Your Honor.
All right, anything from the defense?
No, sir, Your Honor, apologize.
All right, Mr. Dontell, you can't talk to anyone during this break, okay?
Your Honor, do you want him to remain on the witness stand?
Well, I'm gonna let
or
court
leave it?
security do whatever they deem appropriate, whether to stay here or they want to check them out.
Either or has to go in the back.
Whatever you do. All right? All right, I'll take about a 10, 15-minute break. before we bring the jury in?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
Anything from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, let's bring the jury in. Mr. Dontell, I remind you, you're still under oath, okay?
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Make sure you have your own notepads and no one else's notepads. Cross-examination.
Mr. Dontell, were you married in a church?
No.
Where were you married?
Where?
Yeah.
At Ripken Stadium in Maryland.
Okay. Did you take any vows at that wedding?
I did, yes.
Did you vow to be faithful to your wife?
Yes.
You weren't, though, were you?
No.
In fact, there were numerous occasions where you weren't faithful to her. Isn't that true?
Correct.
For a long period of time, several months,
Mhm.
you were having sex with Meagan Jackson, right?
Correct.
All over the place. At your house and other places.
Correct.
Okay. And your wife is still living in your house.
Correct.
And nowhere during that time did you tell her what was happening.
No.
You didn't say, you know, I've met somebody and we need to separate.
No.
You were having sex with both of them, isn't that true?
Correct.
And that is worse than a lie, isn't it, sir? That's betrayal, isn't it?
I suppose so.
You're the kind of man that will lie and betray his own wife. Isn't that true?
I did for a period of time, yes.
Well, if bad enough one time, how about 15 or 20?
Is the question how about 15 or 20?
Well, let's just say, how many times do you have sex with Meagan Jackson?
I don't know.
Too many to count, right?
I suppose so.
We met your wife. Seems like a fine person. You broke her heart, didn't you?
Yes.
You're the kind of man that's so selfish. He'll hurt others. You cried about your family? Up here on that stand, you cried about your family? You weren't crying about your family when you were doing what you were doing with Meagan Jackson, were you?
No, I was completely blind to everything that was going on aside from Megan.
Oh, well, let me ask you about that. You blame Meagan Jackson for having oral sex for you and all that kind of things. You blame her?
I don't blame Meagan Jackson for that. No, sir. I blame myself.
That's a good point. You blame yourself. You're not blaming her. You talked at the beginning like she did this, she did that. You're a grown man. You could have decided to tell her no and never have anything to do with her, couldn't you?
I could have.
And you could have stopped anytime you wanted to. Right?
Yes.
Okay. But you did stop. Even after the way you described these events of that night, through your tears. You were still having sex with Meagan Jackson afterwards.
Correct, for a period, yes.
Okay? So now that takes a special man, doesn't it? To see the things you saw and cry all those tears, and you go right back to having sex with her. That's unusual, isn't it?
I don't know if it's usual or not.
Well, it's wrong, wasn't it?
I would say it was wrong.
Yeah, that Bible you put your hand over says it's wrong, doesn't it?
Yes,
That's adultery. You were committing adultery, right?
right.
And that's in the Ten Commandments that you're not supposed to do
Objection, Your Honor. Is there a question in there?
it. Yeah, I'm asking a question because you understand that it's in the Bible that you don't commit adultery.
I do understand that, yes.
But you were doing it, right?
I've answered this question several times now. Yes, sir, I was.
Well, okay. Now, let's talk about your statements. You freely admitted, I believe, on direct examination that you have lied to the police throughout this process.
Correct.
As you sit there today, even you admit that your testimony is unreliable because you're a liar.
What's the question?
You admit that you're unreliable because of the lies you told and the deception you have practiced.
No, I do not admit that.
All right. So you finally decided to tell the truth today, huh?
I decided to tell the truth once I had protection from your client, once my family was protected from her and her threats.
You were scared of it.
Yes,
Why didn't you leave her? Better yet, why didn't you go tell the police?
I was in jail during this time.
Oh, I'm talking about that period in between. When you saw all this happen, you, at that point, based on your testimony, you hadn't done anything wrong, right? When you get rid of the body, your testimony is you don't have anything to do with the shooting. You didn't know it was going to happen, right?
That's correct. I did not know the shooting was going to happen.
Okay. So you had no agreement with Meagan Jackson to commit a crime until afterwards when you took the body and you did that by yourself, didn't you? She wasn't with you.
We both picked up the body from the scene of death
Who took the
immediately
body?
after the death occurred.
Who took the body to the river?
I took the body to the river.
And she was not with you, isn't that true?
Not when I took the body to the river.
Okay. Now, what I'm saying is, you're a grown man. In fact, you were a county officer. True? Deputy
True.
Carter is a county officer.
True.
And you knew all these, you knew most of these policemen, didn't you?
Several of them, yes.
They were friends.
I wouldn't say that.
Oh, you weren't friends with the policemen?
I wouldn't say we were friends. I worked alongside them frequently.
Well, they knew who you were. You knew who they were.
Some of them, yes.
Part of your job was working with the police.
Objection, Your Honor. He's not asking questions. He's simply making
Ask your
statements.
question.
Isn't it true that part of your job is working with the police?
Yes.
So what stopped you from going to one of your acquaintances and telling them what happened?
The fact that your client told me that if I did that, she would kill me, and I had watched her kill the father of her kids, so I believed her.
Well, why don't you go tell the police that part of the story?
Why don't I?
Yeah, you have her picked up by the police before you did anything wrong.
Because I was afraid she was going to kill me if I told the truth.
You don't expect this jury to believe that you were scared of that woman to such an extent that you wouldn't report what you consider to be and are now telling us is her misconduct. You're not that big of a scaredy cat, are you?
What was the question?
Are you scared? You said you did things wrong, but you scared of that woman sitting over there.
Absolutely.
My question is, as a county officer, why did you take matters in your own hand and report her and see that justice was served on her?
I've answered this question twice already, and the answer is because she told me she would kill me, And I had seen her kill the father of her kids, and I believed that she would kill me as well.
Okay. So, but nothing kept you from reporting it except your fear.
Objection, Your Honor. This has been asked and answered multiple times.
I got him on cross in the work case.
Go ahead. Ask your question to you.
Nothing except your fear of that little woman there prevented you from reporting these incidents to the police. True or false?
That's true.
Okay. Now, let's look at your guilty plea. You remember that pretty well?
I believe so.
Okay. And let me take you through what I believe happened there. You remember who the judge was?
Who the judge was?
Yeah.
Alex Hyman.
Yeah, good. So you decided at the last minute, right as Ms. Waller was standing up, make an opening statement, that you were going to plead to something, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And so, once you said that, they shifted into a guilty plea instead of a full-blown trial. Isn't that true?
Correct.
Okay. And part of that process was to stand you up in front of the judge and put you under oath.
Correct.
Okay. So in other words, you swore in that setting to tell the truth to a sitting circuit judge.
Objection, Your Honor. Still not a question.
He was asking the questions, right?
The judge was, yes.
Judge Howland was asking the questions,
Yes.
and you were responding. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And you told him you were going to tell the truth. Didn't you?
Yes.
And then what happened was Miss Walter stood up in front of the judge, and she gave a rendition of the facts that was going to be a part of the guilty plea. Isn't that true?
I believe so, yes.
Anything else? I don't want to be cut you off.
Answer the question.
So you were there. You saw it happen. That saw her talking to the judge. Didn't you?
What's
Your
the
Honor,
question?
Your Honor, I'm just going to ask that he ask questions
Yeah,
rather than
you-
make statements.
Didn't
Ask
I say
the
that?
question.
I said, didn't you?
Well,
Didn't you stand in front of the judge after Ms. Walter had spoken to the judge?
Yes.
Right. And didn't she say in your presence that you had told her you didn't know what happened to Greg Rice the night that he was brought to the funeral home? You didn't say that, did you?
I don't recall saying that. Do you have something I could read?
Yeah, let me hear you something.
Can I see what you're showing him, please?
Yeah. I'm not gonna show him this because I knew the other one was this guy, right? It's just fake. I need one of this. You want this? For identification. Yes, for identification. Yeah, I just turned there for, yeah, we do. I'm not gonna ask you about it, you might want one.
Defendants 1, marked.
For identification. Mr. Dontell, you're welcome to look at all this document. It is certified by a court order that was present during your guilty plea. You know, like this lady here is taking everything down.
I'm familiar.
That's where this came from. Okay? Now, I'm interested in page 7. Starting at line 15. I'll just read that and then I'll ask you some questions. Oh gosh, hey, we need to get his handcuffs off. He can't. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Let's see. 15. Can you see it well enough to read?
What's that?
Can you see it well enough to read?
I can, yes, sir.
Okay. Line 18,
18.
17 through 20 line, not pages. So pages.
On which page?
Page 8.
Page 8. And what lines?
Let's just go. Let's go to line 16, beginning with according to.
What date is this statement from? This is from the.
Page on 8.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. This is, give me just a second, Jeff. All right. I'll call this security, I had the wrong transcript. I'll just read this. I apologize.
Defendants 2 for identification.
If you're showing him something different, can I see it, please?
Excuse me?
If you're showing him something different, may I see what you're showing him, please?
No, I showed you when I get ready to show you.
You just switched out the exhibit.
I've got mine up there. And I said, well, what you saw on that other exhibit is mine, I showed you mine. But you can see this.
I'm asking to see what you are going to show Mr. Dontell.
You boys trying to find it for me, I'll go on something else. Yeah. Still got it wrong. Yes, sir. All right. Your Honor, can I show him this one, even though it has some lines on it?
Yeah, if it's not an exhibit.
Okay. For him, okay. Great.
Defendants 3 for identification.
Finally got the right one. This is that same transcript we've been talking about. Okay. This is part of what Mr. Walker was saying. Been looking around to see all that. This is her talking to the judge, and I'm interested in 17, 18, and 19.
17, 18, and 19.
Yeah, okay. See if that refreshes your memory.
It doesn't really refresh my memory. So what exactly are we looking for?
Doesn't it say that you told Ms. Walker?
Objection, Your Honor.
I think that's the
Well,
No, that's not in the evidence. Okay.
Well, the fact of the matter is, you told, did you not tell, did Ms. Walker not tell the judge? She told the judge, you claimed you didn't know.
objection, Your Honor.
This thing, he said he didn't recall. And he said that did not refresh his memory.
Have to come at it another way. Do you then deny, sir, that you told Mr. Walker you didn't know what happened to Craig Rice that night? Do you deny that?
Objection. Just as to which time. If we're talking about the,
Overruled, I'll allow that.
You read this, do you deny it?
Do I deny that I told Miss Walter?
That you didn't know what happened to Craig Rice that night?
On what date are we speaking of when I spoke with Miss Walter?
Like October 2nd, 2020?
I didn't speak with Miss Walter on October 2nd.
No, you're talking about October 2nd, 2020. That's denied.
Right. I'm sorry, I just don't understand what you're asking me. You're asking me when which conversation that I had with Miss Walter are you referring to?
No, you're not having a conversation with her in this one. You've already had that conversation.
I apologize. I really apologize. I'm just not following.
What's that? What? What's your objection?
that's not a question. He's
Judge.
making statements, and also Mr. Dontell is simply
Well,
trying.
he's asking him back questions. My understanding is at his guilty plea, you recited the facts, and that was your facts. And he's asking him, does he recall that?
And he's already said he does not recall, and that doesn't refresh his recollection.
Let's ask him the question.
Judge, I'm gonna stay on this point.
All right.
If we're here for 100 years, because this is an official transcript of his guilty plea, it recites what Ms. Walker said. It's crucial to put into evidence that he already told another
Well, you
lie.
can put the transcript into evidence.
All right, but I need to talk to you about that. Can I put it in for impeachment purposes only and not as an exhibit? I mean, I don't want to be introducing any evidence.
Well, then don't put it in, but you're not going to be able to read it.
Judge, I'd like to set this witness aside for a minute and call Ms. Walker.
Let's finish the cross-examination.
Your Honor, I'd like to delay for a few minutes, see if I can get a hold of Judge Hyman.
Hold for a second. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to take up a matter of law. I'm going to excuse you back to the jury room in just a few minutes. Mr. President, correct me if I'm wrong, I get the impression that you want to impeach him on a document, which is a transcript, which he says does not refresh his memory. You want to get that transcript to the jury, but you don't want to introduce it as evidence because you want to be able to close lasting closing arguments.
All I want him to do is read two lines from the transcript.
Well, you're gonna, and he read it, and it doesn't refresh his memory. The only way it can be published to the jury is if you introduce it into evidence.
Well, I'd like you to review the transcript. I just.
For what reason?
Well, because there's Ms. Walter and I both know she made that statement to the judge. And we looked up, so.
Well, I think you're caught in a choice. If you want that information to go to the jury, you're gonna have to put the transcript into evidence, which you're entitled to do. But you're not entitled to get something to the jury for the jury's review without it being in evidence.
I believe the law on this is, if I use it for impeachment purposes, it's not introducing substantive evidence.
I need the authority on that. All right?
Well, I need about 5 minutes right
All
now.
right, I'll do that too.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. All right, we'll stand in recess for about 10 minutes, okay? Mr. Britton, any authority?
Judge, on the authority issue, seemed a little vague to me, but I think it might be a little risky the way I read it.
Well, it's already, I think, Rule 608.
Yeah, yes, sir.
You can ask him if he's got a prior inconsistent statement. If he admits to the prior inconsistent statement, that's it. It doesn't come in. If he denies it, then you can introduce the prior inconsistent statement to impeach his testimony. But you're not going to be able to use it to impeach his testimony without introducing it into evidence.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I believe that's correct. So,
We're gonna move on past that right now. We need more time to try to figure out how to skin the cat.
I understand.
And we made us get over that part for those.
All right.
But we might put the transcript in later. It's a public document. It's a judicial proceeding. It's not hearsay. It's admissible in its own right.
I understand. That's right.
And the state would have no objection to that admission.
But you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to get it to the jury to impeach this witness's testimony without introducing it into evidence.
we understand that.
All right.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you for clarification.
All right, anything from the state before we bring the jury in?
No, Your Honor.
Anything from the defense?
No.
All right, let's bring the jury in. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Make sure you have your own notepads and nobody else's notepads. Brittany, you continue to cross-examine.
Mr. Dontell, is your testimony today that you don't remember what was said at your guilty plea?
My testimony is not that I don't remember what was said at the guilty plea.
So you do remember that you told Ms. Walter that you know what happened to Greg Rice that night?
Objection.
Or do you admit that?
Oh, he said he would call. I'll allow that question. Go ahead.
Could you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you admit that you told Ms. Walter as part of the guilty plea, you didn't know what happened to Greg Rice the night of October 2nd, 2020? Or did you not say that?
I don't recall saying that.
Well, that's just another lie, isn't it, Mr. Dontell? That's the biggest thing in your life, that guilty plea.
My answer would be no, it's not a lie.
Oh, it's not a lie. Do you deny saying it?
I don't recall saying it.
That's been asked and answered. Let's move on.
So you don't recall what was said about you in your guilty plea?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Same question.
Hmm? Yeah, I think I cut you off on that.
No.
But that was, the guilty plea is a significant event in your life, wasn't it?
Yes.
You never pled guilty to anything before, did you?
No, I've never.
So, you're paying close attention to what was going on, I assume.
I was doing my best, yes.
Okay. And you were answering Judge Hyman's questions well as you could.
Of course.
And didn't he ask you if what Ms. Walker said was true and accurate? You said, yes, sir.
I don't recall specifically.
Because if you had said no, sir, he wouldn't have taken the plea. Isn't that true?
I don't know. I've never done this before.
Is it more likely that you said yes, sir, or no, sir?
Objection, Your Honor. He said he doesn't recall.
Sustained.
All right, let's move on a little bit. Now, this business of you having an affair with Ms. Jackson, that ended up producing a pregnancy, didn't it?
Yes.
Okay. You got no qualms about the fact that's your baby, right?
I've never been 100% certain in my heart.
You found out about it. You started making fun of it. You contacted Frank Howard, didn't you? And told him that you were going to give a trip to Florida out of this.
What's the question, sir?
I said, you contacted Frank Howard about her pregnancy. And y'all had some laughs over it. And you said, by the way, I'm going to get a free trip to Florida out of this. And then you went to Florida after the pregnancy was found determined. Is that true?
I don't recall. This is 5 years ago,
You don't
sir.
recall that you made fun of your mistress with a friend and that you got a free trip to Florida out of the abortion question?
I don't recall that.
Did you send her memes showing abort on it? You don't deny wanting the baby aborted, do you?
I don't deny that we had agreed that she was going to get an abortion, yes.
You wanted the abortion, right?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah, because you wanted to keep having sex with your wife and with Miss Jackson. You didn't want her showing. Isn't that true?
That's not the reason.
Well, let's put it like this. Did you do your wife the courtesy of wearing a condom when you were having sex with Miss Jackson? You don't remember using a condom or not? You don't remember anything, do you?
Are you talking about a specific occasion?
Any occasion. Did you always use a condom to protect your wife from what may happen in the sex act or from her getting pregnant? Did you always use a condom?
No.
All right. So you had unprotected sex with her. And as a result of it, there was a pregnancy.
I believe I already answered that question as well.
Now, I think you testified earlier that you were hoping for a lesser sentence. Isn't that true?
Yes.
In this courtroom, you said that, so you have to remember that. That just happened about 45 minutes ago, so you remember saying that, don't you?
I do remember saying that, yes, sir.
Now, you have a history throughout these issues of trying to get what you want. That's part of your MO. You wanted to have sex with your wife, and you want to have sex with Meagan Jackson. Not only did you want it, you got it for months. True?
True.
True.
And I'm sorry, but I feel like I've already answered that 5 or 6 times as well.
I want to hear it again. Mr. Dontell. You don't tell me what questions I ask.
Objection, Your Honor.
right, let's move on.
You're not gonna start crying, are you?
Objection, Your Honor.
All right, let's move on.
Now, this, you came in with a, forget the plea agreement for right now. You came in with a handwritten statement when you were sitting down with the police. Isn't that true?
Correct, yeah.
You don't remember that?
True, I remember that.
Okay. You just testified to it on correct examination.
And I just testified that I remember that.
Okay, you look like you weren't so sure.
Objection, Your Honor.
You sure?
Let's move on.
Is that true?
The question is, am I sure again?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure.
Now, that statement wasn't true, was it?
Which statement?
The written statement.
The written statement was not true in its entirety, no.
Okay, in other words, in the written statement, you said that you weren't around for any killing. That Miss Jackson came to you and told you she had killed Mr. Rice. Isn't that what you said in the written statement?
Yeah, I also have already testified today that I did not tell the complete truth until my attorney arranged with the police to put a GPS safety area around my family. And once that was in place, I told the complete truth, and I've done so ever since.
Well, you've admitted here, and this is one example of it, is it not, to producing false statements to significant officials like the police.
I did admit that already, yes,
And
sir.
this is just another example.
Objection, there's no question there.
That's
Isn't
your
it?
question.
Isn't it?
I would say yes, that is another example.
Now, you testified that you're worried about your family, right?
Correct.
You weren't worried about them when you were having sex with Meagan Jackson, were you?
She had not threatened to kill me at that point.
Hold on, sir. You may not remember this, let me ask you anyway. On the night of the killing, or sometime in connection with the date of October the 2nd, 2020, did you come in contact with that you certified the death of a body that belonged to Mr. Fisher?
I don't recall, sir.
Remember? Do you remember talking to the Myrtle Beach Funeral Home people about the paperwork that hadn't been properly filled out? Does that ring a bell?
I'm not denying that that took place, but it does not ring a bell, no.
Do you remember what you did with that body?
I already testified, I don't remember that body. I handled 600 bodies, sir, and this was 5 years ago.
Could you take him to the county morgue and coroner's office?
Objection, Your Honor. He said he doesn't remember.
I'm not accepting that answer.
I'm not allowed to disclose. Go ahead.
Could you have taken him to the county morgue there in the coroner's office?
I could have, yes, sir.
And do you know, sitting here today, what happened to that man? Where he was?
I don't recall that particular case.
And it happened the same day of what you've described as the killing of Greg Rice, didn't it?
I don't recall that particular case.
You don't recall hardly anything, do you?
I recall quite a bit, but not any of the last several questions that you asked me.
You
No.
don't recall anything I'm trying to ask you that's got any significance. You just say you don't recall. Isn't that what you've been saying?
Please explain the significance, because I would love to answer it properly so that everybody understands what you're asking and what my answer is.
It's a mystery. It's the
It
same-
is.
It's the same day as I understood your testimony, there's gonna be a cooler that Mr. Rice goes in. So, for some reason, that body doesn't go to Myrtle Beach Funeral Home. It goes to the morgue, and nobody I know knows what happened to it after that. Do you? Let me guess, you don't recall.
I don't.
Regret?
Court's indulgence for 1 moment. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm sorry. Mr. Britton brought up the 10 Commandments. I think we all know that thou shalt not commit adultery is one of the commandments. Do you know if thou shalt not kill is also a commandment?
I do know that that is a commandment.
And yet did the defendant break that commandment?
Yes.
Next question. She doesn't need to characterize what we're doing. She asked you a question.
Overruled.
Mr. Britton asked you if you lied multiple times and you admitted that you had. Did the defendant also lie multiple times?
Yes.
Mr. Britton seemed to poke fun of the fact that you were afraid of a quote-unquote little woman. Can you explain to the jury why, despite her apparent diminutive size, you are afraid of the defendant?
The primary reason is because I watched the defendant murder Gregory Rice by shooting him several times, and then she told me she would kill me if I didn't do what she asked in helping him get rid of her and to never tell the truth about what happened. The answer is yes, I'm afraid of her regardless of her diminutive size.
And then there's been quite a bit of questioning about what happened at the time of the plea and then leading up to your conversation with the state a couple days later. I think it would have been 2 or 3 days later. Was the defendant out of custody during that time period when you made the plea all the way up until sometime earlier this year?
I believe so. To my personal knowledge, I believe she was out on bond during that time.
Do you have the same strike back? Mr. Britton was just asking you about, I don't even remember his name, Mr. Fisher or some decedent. Is there something about the night of October 2nd that makes you remember that night when you don't remember one decedent out of 600 that you've dealt with? Did that make sense to you?
Something particular that happened that night is the murder of Gregory Rice. I recall that and everything that goes along with that. But this Mr. Fisher, assuming that he died that date, was not, I didn't witness his death, and I didn't, I wasn't provided any details to recall specifics about that case. So I simply don't recall that particular case without some type of refresher.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, you may step back.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and break for the evening. Please leave your notepads in the jury box. Do not discuss the case even among yourselves. Don't conduct any independent investigations. Don't watch the news. I'm asking please be back at 10:15 tomorrow morning, and we'll follow. Thank you very much. All right, anything from the state before we recess for the evening?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
Anything from the defense?
Nothing from the defense, Your Honor.
All right, I'll probably take the bench at 9:30. Look at what we're going to next week.
The state will be finished, I would believe, by lunchtime tomorrow at the latest.
I don't know. Even if you're done at lunchtime, you still have the defense if they put something up, closing arguments, closing charges, and deliberations.
I was just letting you know when the state is going to be done with its
So I
case.
think we're probably going to be coming back next Tuesday. I need to go ahead and notify court administration.
Okay.
All right?
Your Honor, may we approach just quickly?
Come on up. I'll be taking the bench at 9:30 tomorrow morning. All right?
Oh,